Hello, welcome back everybody. Hope you had a wonderful networking session there. And we'll be putting you back in networking sessions later with new people so you can see new faces and learn about some other people. So it's time for our speaker. Very quickly, my name is Thibaut. You can call me T. I am a co-founder of Funding Focus. And today I have the joy and pleasure of introducing Darja. So $4.4 million. Let that sink in. That's $4.4 million. That's how much Darja has raised for Bunch. Not her first, but her second startup. We're here today to celebrate female and diverse entrepreneurs' achievements and discuss the path that led them here. So without further ado, let me invite Darja Gutnick to the virtual stage to tell us all about how she did it and where she's heading. Darja, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Super glad to be here. Thanks, Thibaut, for the intro, and thanks, David and team, for organizing this and prioritizing this topic, which is dear to my heart, of course. I would love to make this like as open conversation as possible. I'm actually glad it's a smaller group and we can really have deeper conversations and deeper levels discussions. So really encourage you to ask any questions that you ever wanted to ask a VC-backed founder that also has some stories on the female side. But in the end, I'm just a founder trying to build a business and get my team and shareholders a return. My background is actually psychology. So I studied organizational psychology, but also did a bit of corporate as in the beginning of my career. I actually started in a job with BMW, but for a subsidiary where I was kind of engaging in what you would back then call HR strategy, but I think nowadays more like organizational design. Worked with a bunch of engineers and designers to help them create teams and environments where they can thrive, but also be creative, also perform and things like that. And I then went into business consulting, which gave me the slight 5% understanding of financial models. So Thibaut, it's good when you ask me about financial models, but I still don't consider myself an expert, even though I'm working with them since a few years now. But I had the feeling that as a psychologist, I never was taking it seriously just because I'm a psychologist and like decision-making meetings and so on. And I always was driven by impact. So I kind of didn't really like make peace with that. And then went into the business consulting realm, spent 1.5 years there, did relatively classical like revenue up, cost down type of calculations and processes, supported a few companies in growing and a few more in shutting down and refurbishing. And then went on to academia, actually spent 3.5 years in the academic context, studied creativity under pressure and leadership at the intersection, was interested and had this hypothesis that it has to do something with the behaviors that leaders show in an environment that either drive you crazy and make you unproductive or drive you forward and make you productive and fail to save and so on. And this was like 2011 and 12, so still relatively like back in the days when it comes to like future of work and stuff. I think now we've came so much further already and we all understand what psych safety is, I assume, and things like that. But at that time, it wasn't the case. And so it was an interesting field to be in and to research. And after 3.5 years, I noticed that and publishing papers and collecting a lot of data and also helping bachelor and master thesis students graduate, I understood that academia probably won't be my path because no matter how hard you work and how much you compete and how good you are, you always just reach 0.09% of the population with the papers. Like it's incredibly little people that actually ever in a business context look up a scientific publication and start to use the results from that study. I do this sometimes. Other post-academics send like Academy of Management journal links sometimes. I actually send most to David and the team and then notice, oh, I don't know whether to read this thing. So I added a TEDx YouTube link. And I think that really kind of made me question whether that's my place in a way, because I felt like I am maybe not the person that comes up with like the most cutting edge idea in the world. I'm probably the person who will take that idea and then take it to the masses and make sure that we can all access it. And I think it always bothered me that we have so much knowledge in ivory towers and so much of management practice is outdated and nobody even does anything about it and just accepts like it for granted. And so I thought, okay, cool. And I was studying entrepreneurship groups at that time. So I did like a field experiment, went to like entrepreneurship events, and then did some like time pressure studies on creativity and things like this. It was really interesting. And I started to get in touch more and more with founders and understood, oh, they feel like my tribe. Like it's probably more my domain. Let's see what they're doing, what they're up to. And growing up with an entrepreneurial mom as well, who at first scared the shit out of me. And like following her example, I thought, I don't want to be this. There is no rest or anything else. It's all business all the time. But when I started talking to them, I understood that if I wanted to have impact and impact fast, meaning in my lifetime, I probably am better served in the entrepreneurial domain than I am in the academic domain. And so that's how I got to actually build my first startup, had to make the tough decision of back then pausing my PhD. Now I think I am made peace with myself that I will never take that one up, at least. Maybe I do another one. But I paused it and then focused on my first startup, which was in the travel industry. Already worked with some data models. So we use psychometric data to recommend better events and activities for people that weren't speaking the language to traveling to like local geography. So let's say you're English speaking when you don't speak Spanish, but you travel to Argentina or to Colombia or whatever. And you want to have like authentic experiences and have the access to like the best events and activities out there. I think what Airbnb later did with activities was kind of close to what we were doing back then. And we used a combination between Facebook social graph and a psychometric model to actually find out the most fitting things for you. So that, I think, part was really similar to what we're doing in Bunch today, in a very different use case, but there's still recommendation technology, there's still psychometric models, and there's still content to recommend. So all the same thing somehow. But basically, when I came back from the first startup and I returned to Europe and started working with founders and investors, I realized that I yet again maybe have the opportunity to connect two worlds in a way. One is like the founder world, which is always, oh my God, HR is so bad. And like, I don't understand how to do these HR policies and they're so annoying. And like, we just need to focus on the task and like get on with it. And then the sheer opposite, which is like HR expert world, but like, how do the business people never understand it's all about people? Are they stupid? And we're like, I think you're both right. And probably you actually want the same thing, but like, you're not talking the same language. And we started working in a consulting fashion with freelance psychologists and leadership coaches. I actually did leadership coaching certificates and team coaching certificates in that time, and kind of started really focusing on helping them move forward. And then I noticed that it's again all like, it's not the things I invent, it's the things that like scientists invent and like other innovators come up with. And I just find the right things and then bring them to the people that have the use case. And then we apply them and then it actually becomes better. So then I started asking myself, impact again, how can I increase my impact? And then I calculated this model, I remember, with like thousands of consultants or whatever. And I thought, this is so stupid, because no matter how much I sell my days or the days of other people, they will be always just busy and tired, and there will never be enough of us to actually do the job on a worldwide scale. And it's also not a business model that people seem to go for nowadays. So I felt, if you want to have global impact, you actually need to come up with a different solution. And this is how the idea of Bunch was born, which right now, the easiest way to describe it, it's there is Bunch, the recommendation system, which is like a bigger, more complex thing. And then there is, of course, the app we are developing and building and serving right now to 30,000 leaders worldwide currently. And it's an AI coach, we call it. Thank you, David. I feel like this is the best moment in this whole talk. Always, you demonstrate our product, so cool. Yes, and it gives you bite-sized 2-minute wisdom nuggets that you can consume every day with your morning coffee. And it helps you prompt reflection. It helps you remind yourself of things that you already kind of knew, but you didn't know how to apply. So we call them tips, and every tip is very actionable, very short, very like habit building. So we basically are operating on the assumption that if you keep thinking about how you could have improved that last touch point with your employee, or how you could have improved that last conflict that you had on a regular basis, even if it's small chunks, you actually will make more progress over a period of a year than if you try to go to a 3-day seminar, which most people don't go anymore, and try to like soak it all in and then not knowing what to do with it. And so this is where we currently stand. So the product is on the market. We launched it in November 2020. It's still in a freemium model, meaning you can actually still all download it on the App Store if you just enter Bunch Leadership or Bunch Leadership Coach. And the future of the product is twofold. We are adding a few really interesting features because we also built a community next to the product over the past year. And this community is very vivid. And we realized that there is a lot of need that is unaddressed in the current app, which is around identity building and the feeling I'm not alone in this. Others are also learning, and I can actually be open about the mistakes I make and kind of have a psychologically safe space to watch each other learn in a way. And so we were validating and designing and testing a feature set that will enable us to move from AI coaching to peer-powered AI coaching. So basically, weave in a very targeted fashion the ability to interact with others on the topics that you're learning. And a very important point was that people were very clear they don't want another social network because it eats all the time and doesn't bring anything. So we had to very be cautious about steering away from the typical social network type of feature. So it won't feel like it's another feed. It's really more a collection of relationships that you have already or that you can build through the app as well, where you actually solve scenarios together. You see the answers of each other to tricky questions, and you kind of build trust and build relationships that can help you to have this feeling that you have this 24/7 support system, and at the same time achieves the goal the way I started from, which is instead of a coach or a consultant coming in solving the problem for one person, by collecting all this information and tagging it in a clever way, any new leader can then build up on the leadership wisdom of the crowd instead of starting from zero again. So that's the whole idea. And so that's one very important part for Q4 and Q1. And then 2022 will also be about introducing the premium version, which will have to do a lot with tracking, progress tracking. So not us tracking you, but more like you tracking your progress, certification and things like that. Yeah, that's the long short story.
Very cool. So just give us a little bit about your experience of fundraising, because I know I've heard the story, but you have a few interesting stories, the Sandhill Road experience and one or two others. Just share with us a few things that you think might be interesting for people to hear.
So maybe one is on the role of how early to fundraise and what do you do when you notice that you have a pivot coming up, which in our case happened. We didn't start with the product we had. We started with a different product, which was a B2B product. And it was serving a similar mission and a vision because we were the same people, we're after the same thing. However, it was very different, and we charged money for it. It was on the web, it did a different thing. And eventually we come to the conclusion that it doesn't work for us because it doesn't reach the individual. And we saw a lot of potential in the individual growth sector, and basically saw if we want to really make a move and a difference in the world, we need to help each individual make change in the end. And then with that, the organization changes. So we can't just wait, if we give some information to C-level that they will trickle it down. That doesn't work. At least from our observational data, we didn't want to base our business on this. And we were thinking about how to do this, and then we saw this opportunity in this self-improvement sector where we saw, people are starting to pay money for career development themselves, and it's not just an exceptional thing, it's becoming a regular thing, and there's more and more people. And so we proposed the idea of going B2C instead of serving the market B2B. And at that point in time, when we actually did that, which was 2019, nobody was doing this, and we're still one of the first movers. I actually think there's one more company that is trying to do a similar thing, and then the one more big company that is trying to explore in that realm that came from B2B. But the traditional route was B2B, and we're fuck it, let's do B2C, there is an opportunity. And we went to our investors that we fundraised with already. So we took funds, we were running the business, we built this other product, we had some traction, and they were not happy. Because they were I understand you want the bigger opportunity, but there is already paying customers, and what you're going to do with them, and you have to keep this product. And we kept this product for 3 years, and we shut it down finally last year, after we made the evidence that this product already has so much many users and much more traction, and is a much bigger deal than this other product we built before. And I think my point, my conclusion to the story is, best is if you're very clear on your vision and your mission from the get-go, because that helps you filter for potential investment partners. If you're not clear on the mission and vision, but are fuzzy about it, people will buy in that will then disagree with like how you approach it exactly. And in our case, we were lucky enough to have gotten the buy-in afterwards, but it was a lot of work to like get there. Like it was a lot of communication, a lot of conviction making, and another investor that it took who came from the B2C space and from the States and wasn't European, and then joined the club and helped us transition basically. And I think I have a love-hate relationships with funding, VC funding, because I think there's a lot of bad things going on when you look into the industry, and like a lot of things we need to improve. But at the same time, it does give entrepreneurs like me, unfortunately, way too little, but it does give us the potential to actually build something big. And my personal context isn't like, we don't come from money. My mom was born in the Soviet Union. She relocated to Germany together with me, and she then built a restaurant. It was the highest we've ever come. Like when I come back to her and I say like, we raised this amount of money, her like, she doesn't know what to say. She's like, what is this shit? Why like is this so big and whatever? So I think I understand the function. I think it's a very good vehicle to inspire innovation and to help us move forward as humanity. But we also have to be extremely like diligent about the biases we apply when we pick projects and people and ideas. And on that note, I think the other story that is worth sharing is the Sandhill Road one. So I didn't have any kind of misconduct that I experienced with VCs. On a personal note, I know female founders that did, in a very ugly and weird way. Very similar to the story I think we exchanged earlier, David, where someone was asked to engage in sexual activities in order to get the money and things like that. That's, I think these stories are rare, but like they do exist. However, what is like very common is that you are being put into a box where people simply don't see your potential. And even if they would give you money, you would get much lower valuations and you would not get favorable terms, and you don't get as much. And I think that has happened to us repeatedly. The reason why we actually raised 4.4 million over the course of like 4 years is because we never could actually ask for more. And it was when I researched the Dana Kazan research, which I'm happy, or maybe Thibaut or one of the team can help me to find that link back again. But there's a really great like TED talk that she gives, being a former founder herself, on implicit bias and how VCs are seeing the risks in female founders or minority founders and the opportunity in the male founders in a way, specifically when it's cis white male. And I think that played a big role for us. In the last round, I was able to get the highest valuation we've ever gotten. And it was a really tough fight, but I was going into the fight with like equipped with all this knowledge from Dana and like others saying like, this will not happen to me again. But our first round was like ridiculous. We had paying customers and like whatever. And we had a product, we had 5,000 users, we had 30 paying customers, amongst them DigitalOcean, and our valuation was 4.5 million. Yeah. And I was comparing it to other guys that were like friends of mine that were running companies the exact same size with like similar or less traction, and they had valuations of 10 million. And I was like, why? This makes no sense. So I think this definitely, like, there is a lot of impact that comes with that. And the other, like the Sandhill Road story, is kind of similar. So it wasn't like this one event that like damaged me entirely in my like self-identity or whatever, but it definitely caused a lot of confusion and like ruined my day. It inspired me to write a story with my team years later, which then won us an angel investor. Funny enough, kudos to Siraj, who picked up my tweet about the story. But basically, I went to a fundraising event on Sandhill Road. As I said, I was born in the Soviet Union. Like, I have no idea about Sandhill Road. I definitely feel like 1,000 degrees in poster. Sandhill Road, by the way, is...
For anyone who doesn't know, Sandhill Road is the main drag of Silicon Valley.
It's like this super weird place where everything is just very expensive, and there is like lots of Lamborghinis in front of the door, and it's like a hotel, and there's a lot of like tech companies, of course, and like villas of tech entrepreneurs and like whatever. But basically, there's the Sandhill Road Hotel where fundraising events tend to happen and so on. And I was invited because I was an early user of a tool from someone from San Francisco that was called Founder Suite. We still use it. And he gave me a voucher code, and I was just having a trip to San Francisco because we always were close to the American market with our product. So we were kind of always going back and forth, and my co-founder is American. So we're like, let's check out what's going on in San Francisco to like stay on, on the latest. And we were preparing for a fundraising round. So I was like, of course I will go to the event, we'll pitch bunch and we'll see what happens. And it was actually during the B2B time still. So it was 2018, if I remember correctly. And I went there having like my normal, I don't know, like black jeans, chucks, and like a simple shirt. And I had blonde hair at that time, short. And I came up to the registry. I was prepared to show my Eventbrite registration code, which is what I do in these situations. And the person that was at the table or the desk was kind of, with whom are you here, or something like this? And I'm like, I'm on my own. And are you registered? And I'm like, yeah. And I was just pulling out my phone, but then he didn't want to see it and was asking like, but do you have a registration of your business? Can you prove that this is your business that you claim to be a founder of? And I was super like confused, and I'm like, okay, I can pull up some emails with our lawyers of registration or something. Okay, let me do this. So I did. I showed it to him, and then I also had to show a business card, but then that wasn't enough. So it was a step before business registration. And then eventually he believed me and let me in, and I was super confused and like, what was this about? And feeling uncomfortable because everyone else was behind me already, and like I was holding up the queue. And then I went in, I found Nathan, who was the founder of Founder Suite, and I explained to him what just happened, and I couldn't, in my social framework, that didn't fit into a normal registration process. And Nathan was at first confused as well, but then he was like, oh, it's because there is like these professional sex workers that hang out in the lobby of this hotel, and now they have this like hack that they dress up as female entrepreneurs, and then they move into these events to like surpass the security. And so you probably fell into their filter. And I was like really shocked, because on an identity level, it really like proved once more that I, first of all, don't look like an entrepreneur would look, and I rather look like a professional sex worker. But I don't have any issues with professional sex workers. I think they're doing like the job they would want to do, at least in those cases where they do. So I'm actually not criticizing for being taken as one. It's just superbly weird that the probability of being a female with like blonde hair or whatever, moving into that like situation would be, in their head, the probability is much higher that you actually belong to that group rather than that you would be an investor or you would be a founder. And these situations happen to me again and again. I think at a different conference later as well in Berlin, where it was like a weird event as well. I think it's called the Escort Gate, where like there were a lot of escort ladies invited. We don't know why, and like was all super creepy in the end. And then I again was taken for one of them, even though like my outfits are really like plain and simple. But I think it's the Eastern European heritage and the faces they like kind of compare and make up. And so I think it's just, I think what hit me in that moment is that we continuously need to like show faces and need to make clear that the people that drive like success and drive innovation and are working really hard and are fighting for their visions, like they don't necessarily all look like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. Like I actually like Elon Musk, no issues with the person, like learn a lot from him. But it's not the only story. There is like so many perspectives. And I think we need to showcase that more so that these stereotypes, not only gender, but specifically, I think people of color suffer from that even more, help, being taken down over time. But yeah, that's like my funny anecdotes
Very cool.
about the VC space.
Thank you. I think we have a few other questions from the audience. T?
Let's do it.
I do have a question. So when talking about financial models, and obviously we've discussed this, you said they're always off by, at least 50%. Is it better to overshoot your figures and make them look better than they actually will be? Or is it better to underestimate and then be able to overachieve?
I think this is a really cool question, because I give a simple answer and then I explain my anecdote. So my simple answer is the more further in the future they are, the more they can be off, I guess. And the closer they are to reality, like next year, whatever, the more real and based on real assumptions that you have validated they should be, would be this is what I learned so far. This is like the principle I'm going by. Because also you have many more opportunities in the future. You'll never know. As we were, before we jumped on this call, David was saying, I have an important dinner with someone that can turn our business around. And like, in 5 years from now, I can have many dinners and turn my business around. And who knows how our financial projections look like. So I think in the future, it's more a sign of your ambition. And in the next year, it's more a sign of your diligence, I would say. But my anecdote is when it depends on the context. So when you're fundraising and you're close to closing a round, even if it's just an extension round or like something in between, like it doesn't matter. Being precise with your numbers and then overshooting them a little bit is, in my opinion, always better. But if you're not raising a round right now, I think in order to like motivate your team, I think you can push it a little bit harder for the next year and like not fall on the comfort zone so much. The problem is when you have a year where you also fundraise and then you like made the second half of the year maybe a little bit too glorious, and then you actually have a lower baseline, so you have to like make it all up or correct them or whatever you end up doing. But in any case, I don't think there is like one clean way to deal with this. At least I haven't found it, and I was researching this topic together with my co-founder many years. I think it's very important that you're transparent about it with all shareholders. Basically, we have adjusted numbers many times because something changed. Our assumptions were validated differently. We learned now this conversion rate is not that. It's been that for 6 months. So better also just like to adjust it in the model and then see what happens instead of kind of hope that numbers will rain from the sky, because they never do. So I think timely and transparent communication is important.
Thank you. And I see, T, we've got a raised hand from Klaus.
I really enjoyed listening to you. And
Thank
for
you.
a number of reasons that would be taking way too long to explain why you did that. But you may guess something. Have you ever considered working with an organization like Techstars? You are aware of Techstars, right?
Yeah. We actually, with my first startup, we were part of a Techstars adjacent accelerator. So they weren't Techstars, but they were called NXTP Labs, which was like the wider Techstars network. Yeah, I did.
As you have been in Berlin, you might have had an opportunity to meet with Jack 2 years ago, close to 2 years ago, January last year. We were doing a bit of workshops with the cohort back there, and there was actually a founder team that claimed to do team coaching via an app. And take my early words of how I started, you may get a sense. I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but you certainly have something that I'm happy to say, great. While there was a little bit of a stubbornness around certain things. So the beauty is how you went through all of that. So I don't need to repeat that. You know that. That's also wonderful. But the curiosity is around organizations like Techstars, like to take startups under their umbrellas. They have a very stringent program style, and they kind of offer you funding. And I would like to understand how your thinking and decision-making process was to actually go the route that you chose. Looking back, it seems to have been perfect, but looking forward, that's much harder to say.
And I totally don't think it was perfect. I blame myself for like taking too long, taking on too much money, taking money on too early, then pivoting in the middle of the route. Like all these things are, I feel like, kind of some sort of debt on the organization and me. And those things are not easy, because especially when we have like, when we went from B2B to B2C, we had to let some of our team members go because they weren't really fitting anymore into that new direction. We could keep some, which we were really happy about. We also tried to be stringent on cash flow and kind of be very aware of that. Those weren't easy decisions. I don't know whether those people would agree with you. You know, like, of course, they understood at that time the rational argumentation, but it still hit them, and it was like not good and not comfortable. So I would do many things differently. The one thing that it all boils down to, though, is I went very far on the done is better than perfect, just ship it and learn with the market. That was always my number one type of thing, adaptability above everything. And with my co-founder, but also my journey, I learned I still believe that's 80% of what matters, like with the persistence and the resilience. But I do think that the part of like thinking through your vision and being clear and communicating it and using help of others to do that and admitting to yourself, you're not the best with words. You need help with that. And being totally okay with having like a copywriter working with you or someone else to make it really crisp and very clear and boil it down to one sentence that you can stand behind. I think this would have helped us to save a few routes. And I would only encourage every entrepreneur to invest a lot of time into this. In the beginning, if you can, in parallel with the testing, like there's 2 things you need to do, 3 things you need to do in the early stages, like build a team, test your hypotheses, and really work on the communication of your vision. And I hope, or I wish that Techstars and other partners can provide that support and be like really good at that. I didn't find that with the accelerator back then. I think I found it in the team. I worked with our marketer very closely. Both of them actually made a huge difference for me over the time.
Thank you.
I think Drew has a question too. No? Yes?
I think he does.
Sorry, just fixing the mic. Hi, Darja. My question was just in general, as a young entrepreneur myself, what's the key piece of advice you would give us when it comes to running a business, perhaps planning to run a business, creating a plan? What's some key skills or qualities you would say is applicable to that?
I think 3 things stand out to me. I think there is like an array of things. It kind of depends on strengths and weaknesses of yourself. But I think number 1 is definitely self-awareness, like knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at, which is hard for many entrepreneurs because often they come from highly ambitious environments and like but I'm good at like this array of things and I'm good at 80%, like I'm 80% in all of them. I'm like this generalist person, can do it all. And like many times you actually can go with that. And it's very confusing to then understand, but it's about the nuances. So self-awareness and practicing self-awareness, I think is super important. The second would be compassion and like emotional intelligence when you deal with your team and understanding that they are not in your journey.
Of course.
You have a shared journey, but they're not in your journey. They don't deserve the same amount of pressure. They don't deserve the same amount of exposure to the threats. Walking the line between transparency and psychological safety is very hard, I think. And I think thinking very hard about what they need instead of what you think you need to tell them is very important. And still keep your integrity on like what you think they should know. I don't have a good like one-off answer to this, but I think this is like a thing I spend thinking about constantly all the time still. And the third part is what I kind of already touched upon earlier is the clarity of vision and really having that inner conversation with yourself. Why are you doing it? Not like what the market wants and what your customers want. That's I feel table stakes. You have to figure out how to do market and user research, read the mom's test book and like other things on the market, like understand how to test the market. But that's more like an academic scientific thing in my eyes, figure out your test suite. But I think what it really comes down to, where like for me the resilience comes from, is many times I got to a point where I didn't know, or I felt like I don't want to do this anymore. It's too hard. And then I asked myself, what the fuck would I do instead? And then I was like, fuck, but no, I cannot stop. This is my mission. If I start doing it right now, I open another company doing the same thing. And that's going to be much more complicated. So maybe let's just keep going. And I think this like inner dialogue and sharpening why you're doing it and really driving from your personal mission into the company mission and like understand how they're related and writing things down, having dialogues with people that can help you surfacing this. Like I'm not good in surfacing my own stuff. I need prompting questions. So having people that you can do that with is very important. And asking for help. Of course. This is my bonus part.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Darja. We've got time for one more question, and Richard has his hand up. So, Richard, if you want to unmute and fire away.
Sure. Thank you, David. It's nice to meet you, Darja. Really interesting story. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have 1/2 questions. I'll let you pick or do both together. Slightly unusual, but something I like to ask people. If you were to kind of hop in a time machine and go back to 2014, so you're sort of coming towards the end of your PhD, doing consulting, if you could kind of slip yourself a note, what would it say? And also, if you could go back in time to then, would you follow the same path that you have done over the last 7?
Two very good questions. I think the first one's actually very easy. I think I would tell myself, take better care of yourself. Hard as an entrepreneur, also burned out in 2014 would have been a great advice. I wouldn't have listened to it probably. It's so important because it's a marathon with multiple sprints. So you kind of have to hydrate and eat and sleep. It's just what it is. It's the physics of the human nature. Maybe we've surpassed them eventually with the longevity projects, but who knows? The second question is, would I do the same thing again? I definitely wouldn't. I would want to cut to the chase faster. I would have done a few things similarly. I would have banked on, I don't want it to sound like weird or whatever, but I always banked on giving people a chance that other people wouldn't give a chance, the so-called underdogs. If I vetted them and I feel like there's potential and they have the hunger and the drive and they're going for it and they're eager to learn, I always prefer these type of people. And I think I would do that again. I think it's very hard to hire Ivy League alums, and my position being a female founder in Berlin that looks like a sex worker at fundraising events in San Francisco. I didn't even attempt to try to hire people from, now I would, I think, but back then I wouldn't have stood a chance. And so my only chance was to go for people that are mission driven, that have a good B+, that can ship B+ quality quickly and regularly. What I wouldn't do again is be fluffy with my vision. I would understand that vision is actual thing, it's scientific. You can iterate on it, you need to put effort and use all the templates and somehow get to the core, and that the market defines whether your vision is good. The market being your team, your stakeholders, if they understand and it lands with them and they're like, wow, yes, that I buy into and it's good and I get where you're going, then it's good enough. If they don't have this feeling, if they have this slight confused face but say, then it's not good enough. So I would have spent more time clarifying my vision. And I think I also lost time listening too much to what my investors wanted and what kind of the market seemed to want in that time, but was focused on the laggard market with Germany. I saw that we will be going into at least consumerized enterprise, if not consumer direction. But I couldn't execute it fast enough. And I think I wish myself more courage and clarity back then to be able to cut to that a bit faster.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If it's okay with you, I might actually steal from you marathon with multiple sprints. I haven't heard that before. I like that line.
Yeah. Know when your sprint start and ends, and know when the next one is, and promise everyone a marathon.
Looks like we've got another hand up. Pamela.
Thanks, David. As well, you've been talking, Darja. I mean, it's been really interesting stories. Thank you very much for sharing. But a lot of it has been about you and your business and your thinking process. But what tips have you got about choosing between different investors? And, did you have a choice, or was it really whoever will actually come and fund me is the one I'll grab? And what lessons have you learned about differentiating, what makes a good investor in your business and a good partner for building it, rather than somebody who's just trying to make a buck and run? But yeah, what's your views on that part of the side of the partnership?
We had a few choices, but we also were in a position often where we didn't. And one of the partnerships actually was very organic. I was telling the story in the past talk where we turned a former customer into a VC partner when he joined a VC firm, and we took that relationship into the pipeline funnel, and the firm reviewed us and agreed to invest, which was, I think, the best in my eyes, that was the best relationship we had. The other ones were like pretty much like find yourself on the market, see whether you can do it or don't do it, and then move on. I think my biggest advice would be to look for what type of companies they're funding. That's the quickest way to find out whether you want to be part of those. Like, do you like the products? Do you like the approach to the solution, to the problems they take? Do you like the people behind it? Do they have diversity in their teams? How are the companies that they're funding? I think that says so much more about their thesis and how they make decisions, rather than actually listening to whatever their website says or what they say in the pitch. I did say no a few times, not in the very last step, more like earlier, where I didn't feel comfortable in the pitch conversation, for instance. And it was like on the border to like weird nuanced sexism. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think we should do this. And like we backed out and then didn't progress. These situations happen, but I definitely like wish I would have had more choices so that I can apply all these filters, but oftentimes you just can't. And I think then it comes down to like how much you want to pursue your mission and how much you need to stakeholder manage later to make sure that they still buy into like the moves you make.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks very much, Darja. You've been incredibly generous with your stories and your time. Obviously, you're welcome to stay with us, but I know you've also got a big business to run. So if you need to dash, thank you very much on behalf of everyone.
I do.
That's great. Okay, super. And T, if we could put people back into the breakout rooms, we'll go into the breakout rooms for 15 minutes for another networking session, and we'll see you back here for closing comments. All right. See you all soon.
Thank you so much. Good luck and have fun.
Bye-bye.